What's driving all the violence and a lot of the division out there that law enforcement has to deal with, and in turn drives law enforcement attrition, recruitment issues, you name it? I had an opportunity to sit down with Polk County Sheriff Brent Waak to discuss this and some other really interesting issues. So guys, let's get into it. Sheriff, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
So since the last time you and I have spoken, so many things have changed. But, right before we started rolling, you said something that really caught my interest. And while we're going to hopefully do a handful of videos here today, I wanted to start on kind of that. So you made a comment about the fact that, and if I'm putting words in your mouth, just back me off and fix it. But you made a comment, something to the effect of things just seem to be getting worse. The violence seems to be getting worse. Tension seems to be getting worse, and you're seeing that as a sheriff. Am I getting that right? And can you go into some details about the sort of stuff you're seeing, not only maybe in your county, but what you're hearing about just elsewhere around both the state as well as nationally?
Yeah, I think it's you're spot on with that. And, we're just seeing an increase in mental health cases. We're seeing suicides on the rise. We're seeing overdose deaths. The open borders are adversely impacting every community. Every community is a border community because of the flow of illegal drugs. We're seeing people directing violence towards law enforcement. As you know, two adjacent counties to mine saw the loss of their law enforcement officers through violent actions. And the lack of respect. Now, I live in a community that is so supportive of law enforcement. I always say I feel like I'm in that eye of the storm where it's good where I'm at, but if you get on the outside of that eye, it is a whirlwind. And, I see that with the morale of officers. We see that in the retention and recruiting for officers. Nobody's pursuing this career path because there is violence directed towards law enforcement, disrespect directed towards law enforcement. The minute somebody gets approached by law enforcement, they want to quickly pull their phone out and start recording and really challenge the law enforcement. So, at the end of the day, that makes a very difficult environment to recruit people and to want to stay in this line of work.
I remember if you go back about maybe 10 or so years, and you probably don't even have to go back that long, but it felt like, and from speaking to other law enforcement, friends that I have, if there was one opening, or let's say there are 5 openings for a department or something like that, you may have 100 applicants. And now it feels like if you've got 5 openings, you've got 6 applicants. Right. And you're just kind of deselecting the bottom. And there's been so much, not only difficulty as far as getting people, younger folks to come in, but so much attrition off the middle of the ranks and at the higher ranks of people who are just saying this isn't worth it anymore. Where do you think that's coming from? I mean, you mentioned a couple things, but what do you think are the problems driving those things? If those are the symptoms, what's the illness?
Well, I think the wrong approach was to paint law enforcement as the villains and the bad guys. I was raised to respect law enforcement and that they're there to help you. And granted, when I was the recipient of a speeding ticket, it didn't feel like that. But nevertheless, the big picture there was the ultimate thing of getting the speeding ticket was it kept me safe. I'd rather have a ticket than a horrible accident. So people don't always see the big picture in what we do. But it at the end of the day, this is some of the most unsettling times I think our country has went through since probably the 60s, with social pressures on law enforcement and this law enforcement reform. What does law enforcement reform look like? Right now, it looks like crime rates through the roof. It looks like attacks to officers, assaults on officers, and the straight up challenging authority. And, what made our country great was establishing law and order. And we have to get back to giving our law enforcement the proper resources they need and also the respect they deserve.
Yeah, and coming from my end, so I don't even have to put my criminal defense attorney hat on this, and I really do my best to not bleed over kind of my own politics and philosophy into lots of things. But, I know from having read Lord knows how many comments on our videos, on my videos over some time now, both on this channel as well as stuff that I do for another channel. that if you say anything supportive of law enforcement, there's going to be that element who says, oh, bootlicker and all this other kind of stuff, right? And those may be folks who self-identify as being to the right of center politically, but there's that element that I think kind of goes beyond libertarian, because to my way of thinking, so I guess I'm going to do exactly what I said I try not to do. A functioning society, a functioning republic has to have institutions to uphold the pillars of that republic. And those institutions need to be constantly revitalized. There needs to be checks and balances on one another. For instance, the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and so forth. But without those pillars of society, things go bad. Things go poorly if we just decide to throw out and say, yeah, we don't need courts. And I would absolutely apply that to law enforcement as well. It's law enforcement is a necessary pillar of society. I'm not aware of any functional civilization, at least any of length, so I would, hence the term functional, that does not have a place of respect for law enforcement. And that respect obviously has to come from a place where law enforcement is being monitored and revitalized, because every human institution is going to have issues. But I mean, it's almost like one of those litmus tests of how do you treat law enforcement? How do you treat the vital civic organizations that safeguard our rights? And yeah, we have to be safeguarded. You have to watch the watchers, of course. But I look at everything that's been going on, and it's been building for some time, and I feel like 2020 was kind of the dam was breached with respect to lots of these issues. I guess let me just kind of throw that out there for you. I mean, what do you think about anything of what I just said? And do you feel like 2020 we saw kind of the hockey stick moment of things just really take off?
Well, I think there was, even before 2020, there was this sudden blame game where they started placing undue scrutiny on law enforcement. And, we get split seconds to make a life and death decision. And yet the people afterwards have an unlimited amount of time, and just an unlimited amount of time to critique that. And so we don't always get it right. I always say that, what always kept me interested in law enforcement was no 2 days were the same. No people are the same. No 2 calls are the same. There's no playbook that says if you do this, it's going to work. You kind of learn that as you go. And I watched a lot of the veteran officers I worked with, because they obviously had success because they had been doing it a long time. And I took notes on those, how they interacted with people. And, part of this, the biggest part of law enforcement is communication. And I think we've done a poor job sometimes of communicating our successes, and we often only highlight our failures. So I think that's an aspect of it. But we have to, as a society, accept law enforcement and go back to the days of law enforcement is there to help you. Law enforcement is there to help you resolve a crisis. And I think over time, there's been a lot of additional responsibilities put on law enforcement. But, I think we've adapted and we've, handled those challenges. But ultimately, if in our society, we don't have somebody to enforce the law to keep us safe, and that's what it's about. It's public safety, and there's many facets of public safety. But we have to support that. And when this country decided in 2020 to make law enforcement kind of this kickball, this ping pong to kick on both sides, and that's where we've regressed as a society. And I think that's why we're seeing high crime rates. When I saw a video once, I believe it was in New York, where someone was throwing water at the cop, and the cop just backed away and got in their car and drove away. That's a hard thing to watch, because and I commend the officers for having the patience, knowing that they're in a spot they're going to lose no matter what action they take. So they backed away. But it's got to come back to a point where we respect law enforcement. We treat them with the respect they deserve.
And I'll, again, be remiss to say that, obviously, if you're being investigated for an offense or if you've been involved in a defensive gun use, law enforcement may be your friends, but, folks, that's not the time to open your mouth at that particular point. Talk to an attorney first. That's the defense attorney talking now. Guys, if you stuck around this far in the video, I tremendously appreciate that. And also the Second Amendment would appreciate your support. Be sure to click like, not only for the Second Amendment, but also to show your support for Sheriff Brent Waak. Also as a courtesy, thank you for having him come in. And let us know in the comment field, what do you think about all this? What do you think's driving some of the tension, some of the issues? What kind of challenges, if you're in law enforcement? I know a lot of folks in law enforcement, from reading comments over the last 6 months, you're retired, you're out there. What kind of issues are you seeing today? And maybe what issues did your generation have to deal with? And compare and contrast them for us. I'd love to get your perspective on it. Of course, don't forget to hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss any of our future content. And don't forget, if you want to support the channel and also gain exclusive benefits as well, don't forget to check out our membership option. So thanks very much. Back to the show. I want to kind of close on throwing you and lobbing you a question here of, if you could fix one thing, and I don't mean we need more respect for law enforcement, but if you could pass some sort of policy initiative or something like that, is there something that you think could fix that, either at the legal level of legislation or even at a cultural level? If you could just kind of push a button and, hey, this gets tweaked.
Well, I think that's a tough question to answer. So that, hats off, good question. But accountability, we need the accountability piece in our society. I can arrest 10 people, but if at the end of the justice system they're all turned loose, there's no impact there. So until we have somebody that fears the legal system again, that knows there's consequences, we're stuck. I point this out to my county board because I've got a video where we actually bought methamphetamine in the parking lot where the county board meets. And then as recent as this week, we had fentanyl and meth in a car outside the government center. People had went in for some services through human services, and their drugs are in the car, and our canine found those. At the end of the day, it's the lack of respect for the system. It's a system failure. I feel like we go out and we do our job, and then after we've made our arrests, the ball slowly rolls away, and there's a lack of that accountability. And I think it takes a lot of people to come together and put their heads together to find the solutions for this, because there's obviously a cost to locking people up in prisons. There's a cost to incarceration. There's a cost to treatment. So as a society, we've got to figure out where we want to put that money. So I guess I probably sidestepped your question a little bit there, because there's no easy answer to this.
I'm an attorney. It rubs off on people across the table. You're okay. Well, thank you, Sheriff, for coming in.
Thank you.
Guys, thanks for hanging around this long. Both myself as well as the algorithm thanks you. If you've not already done so as well, just a quick reminder, don't forget to hit that like button. Tells me that you like this stuff. Tells the sheriff that you liked him. I'm pointing to him because he's still sitting over there when I'm filming this. And of course, it also tells the YouTube algorithm and the algorithm gods that this was good stuff and other people should see it. Thanks very much, and I will see you in the comments section and in the next one. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, please feel free to check out some of our other great content, and we'll see you in the next one.